The phone call came on Easter Sunday, 2009. Rosemary Cooper, 61 years old, silver-haired and lean from 3 decades of farm work, stood in her kitchen staring at the number on the caller ID. A number she hadn't seen in 4 years. A number she'd half expected would never appear again. Vivian Anderson, her sister-in-law. The woman who'd spent 20 years telling anyone who'd listen that Rose was cheap, backwards foolish. The woman who'd laughed the loudest when Rose bought 2 rusted tractors at an estate auction in 1979. The woman who'd called those tractors junk. Rose's hand hovered over the phone. Let it ring, let it go to voicemail. After everything, after all those years of mockery and judgment, what could Vivian possibly have to say now? But Rose picked up anyway. Because that's who she was, always had been. Vivian. Silence on the other end. Then a sound Rose had never heard from her sister-in-law in 30 years. The sound of someone crying. Rose, I need to say something. Something I should have said 24 years ago. Rose closed her eyes. She knew what was coming. She'd known it would come eventually. The vindication she'd never asked for, never wanted, but that time and mathematics had delivered anyway. You were right, Vivian whispered. About everything. About the tractors. About the debt. About all of it. And I was wrong. So terribly, completely wrong. Rose stood there in the kitchen of the farmhouse she owned free and clear. Outside the window she could see her land, 390 acres of it, paid for, every inch. I know, Rose said quietly. I lost everything, Rose. You know that. But I never apologized. I never told you that those tractors you bought, those old Farmalls, everyone laughed at. They weren't junk, they were freedom, and I've spent 24 years understanding what that means. But this story doesn't start with that phone call. It doesn't start with Vivian's apology, or with the vindication, or with the 390 acres Rose would eventually own. It starts 30 years earlier, April 1979, in a funeral home in central Illinois, with a woman standing over a casket, wondering if she'd just inherited salvation or ruin. The viewing room smelled like carnations and furniture polish. Rose Cooper, 31 years old, stood at the back of the room wearing the only dress she owned. Black simple, bought on sale at JCPenney 3 years ago for another funeral. Her hands were rough from 8 years of construction work. Calluses on her palms, scars on her knuckles, the kind of hands that knew how to swing a hammer, carry lumber, mix concrete. Not the kind of hands anyone expected to see steering a tractor. Uncle Robert lay in the casket at the front of the room. 83 years old when the stroke took him 3 weeks ago. No wife, no children, just a farm. 190 acres of decent ground in central Illinois that had been in the family since 1923. And now, it was hers. The lawyer had called 2 days after Robert died. The will was simple. Everything to Rose. The land, the house, the barn, free and clear, no mortgage, no liens, just land and a choice, farm it or sell it. Rose's husband Warren stood beside her, 33 years old, quiet like always. His hand found hers, squeezed once. You okay? He whispered. I don't know, she answered honestly. Because here's what Rose knew. She knew construction work. Knew how to read blueprints, how to frame a wall, how to install drywall. She'd spent 8 years doing it, one of 3 women on a crew of 28 men. Hard work, good pay, overtime hours that let her save $12,000 one paycheck at a time. But farming, that was different. The viewing room was filling up now. Neighbors, other farmers, people Robert had known for 60 years. And walking through the door fashionably late was Vivian Anderson, Rose's sister-in-law, 46 years old, Warren's older sister. Everything about Vivian announced prosperity. The dress probably $400, the shoes designer, the haircut salon fresh. She moved through the room like someone accustomed to attention, to deference, to being noticed. Vivian farmed 280 acres 8 miles west, had been farming since she married Earl Anderson 20 years ago, had all the equipment, all the experience, all the confidence that came with 2 decades of doing something successfully. She spotted Rose and Warren. made her way over. "Warren, Rose." She kissed Warren's cheek, gave Rose a look that might have been sympathy, but probably wasn't. "So sorry about Robert. He was a good man." "Thank you," Rose said. "I heard you inherited the land." Vivian's voice carried. Other people could hear. "That's wonderful. Such a blessing." "Yes." "What will you do with it?" And there it was, the question everyone had been asking. What will you do with it? "Rose, I'm going to farm it." The words came out before Rose fully realized she'd decided. But once they were out, she knew they were true. She was going to farm it. Vivian's perfectly shaped eyebrows lifted, just slightly, just enough. "You're going to farm it." Not a question, a statement, layered with implications. "Yes." "Rose, honey, do you know anything about farming?" "No, but I can learn." Vivian smiled, the kind of smile that looked warm but felt cold. "Of course you can. It's just... farming is hard, Rose. It's not like construction. It's weather and markets and equipment and timing. And you don't have any equipment." "I know." "You'd need tractors, a planter, a combine or custom hire, implements. We're talking serious investment here." "I understand." Vivian put her hand on Rose's arm. Gentle, concerned, loud enough for others to hear. "I just worry, that's all. A woman farming, alone, without experience. It's a big risk." Rose felt Warren tense beside her, felt her own jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level. "I won't be alone. Warren will help." "Of course he will. But Warren works construction full-time. You'd be doing the farming. A woman. On a tractor." Vivian let that hang in the air. "Anyway, if you need advice, you know where to find me. I've been farming 15 years. I know the dealers, the equipment, what works and what doesn't." "I appreciate that." "Anytime, sweetie. Anytime." Vivian drifted away to pay respects to the casket. Rose stood there, feeling like she'd just been patted on the head and told to run along. Warren leaned close. "Don't listen to her." "I'm not. She's trying to make you feel small." "I know. You can do this." Rose looked at him. At this man who'd married her 8 years ago, when she was a construction worker with rough hands and big dreams. Who'd never once told her she couldn't do something because she was a woman. Who'd believed in her when no one else did. "I know," she said again, and this time she meant it. But knowing she could do it and actually doing it were two very different things. 3 days later, Rose walked into Morrison's John Deere dealership. The showroom gleamed. Polished concrete floors reflected the overhead lights. The smell of new rubber and fresh paint and hydraulic fluid filled the air. 6 brand-new tractors sat on display. John Deere green and yellow. Beautiful machines. Powerful. Modern. Everything a farmer could want. Everything Rose couldn't afford. Clayton Morrison spotted her from across the showroom. 54 years old. Thick around the middle. Expensive watch. Been selling John Deere equipment in this county for 26 years. Knew every farmer within 50 miles. He walked over with the kind of smile salesman perfect over decades. "Help you, miss?" "I need a tractor." Clayton's smile didn't waver, but something in his eyes shifted. Curiosity. Maybe amusement. "You need a tractor?" "Yes, sir." "For farming?" "You're a farmer." "I'm about to be." He studied her, took in the work boots, the jeans, the flannel shirt, the calloused hands, the lack of makeup. This wasn't a woman who'd wandered in by accident. "All right, then. What are we working with? How many acres?" 190. Clayton nodded slowly. "Corn and beans." "That's the plan?" "Good. Good ground in this county. You'll do fine." He gestured toward the tractors. "For 190 acres, I'd recommend a 4240. Maybe a 4440 if you want more power. Both solid machines, reliable, efficient. Give you everything you need." He led her to a green tractor in the middle of the showroom. Beautiful machine. Looked like it had just rolled off the factory floor. Because it had. "This here's the 4240. 90 horsepower. Plenty for your operation. Handles a 4-row planter easy. Good on fuel. Parts are readily available. Warranty coverage. This is a tractor that'll last you 20-30 years if you take care of it. Rose looked at the price tag dangling from the mirror. $38,000. Her entire life savings was $12,000. Clayton saw her looking at the price. I know it seems like a lot, but that's what financing is for. Nobody pays cash for equipment anymore. Here's how we'd structure it. 10% down, that's $3,800. We finance the rest over 7 years at 12%. Your monthly payment would be right around $620. Rose did the math in her head. 620 times 12 months, times 7 years, $52,000 for a $38,000 tractor. $14,000 in interest alone, more than her entire savings. That's a lot of interest, she said quietly. It's an investment, Rose. You've got to think of it that way. This tractor is going to last you decades. It'll pay for itself in efficiency and productivity. You can't farm competitively with old equipment. What about used tractors? Clayton's smile tightened, just slightly. We don't carry much used inventory. Market's hot right now. Used equipment sells fast. We get something and it's gone in a week. But honestly, Rose, you don't want to start your operation with used equipment. You need reliability. You need warranty coverage. You need modern efficiency. You need parts support. I need something I can afford without taking on debt I'm not sure I can service. The smile faded a little more. That's what everyone says when they first look at the numbers. But Rose, think about it this way. You've got to invest to succeed. Farming isn't cheap. You've got to spend money to make money. You can't compete with your neighbors who have modern equipment if you're running old junk. Let me think about it. Sure. Take your time. But don't wait too long. These 4240s are moving fast. I've sold 3 this month already. Spring planting's coming up. You need to get set up. Rose thanked him and walked out of the showroom into the parking lot. Sat in her truck for 15 minutes. Just thinking. $52,000 for a $38,000 tractor. $620 a month for 7 years. What if grain prices dropped? What if she had a bad crop year? What if something else went wrong? She'd lose the tractor. Probably lose the land trying to keep up with payments. There had to be another way. The newspaper was on the seat beside her. She'd circled an ad that morning. Estate sale this Saturday, equipment auction, and in the listing buried among planters and plows and grain bins were 2 words that had caught her attention. 2 Farmalls. The voice stopped her before she got back in her truck. Rose Cooper. Fancy meeting you here. Vivian Anderson stood beside a gleaming BMW. New, maybe 2 months old. She wore a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Rose's truck payment. Vivian. Hi. Shopping for equipment, I see. Good for you. Clayton's the best. He'll set you up right. Vivian glanced toward the showroom. What are you thinking, a 4240? That's what I'd recommend for your acreage. Solid machine. I'm still deciding. Smart. Don't rush into anything. Vivian moved closer, lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. But between you and me, you need at least 2 tractors to farm efficiently. I have a 4440 and a 4020 backup. Cost me a fortune, but it's worth it. The 4040 alone was $46,000, but Rose, it's an investment. You understand that, right? You can't farm with cheap equipment. Rose felt something cold settle in her stomach. $46,000. Financed, of course, with interest. Vivian probably owed $60,000-70,000 by the time she paid it off. I'm not planning on cheap equipment, Rose said carefully. Just affordable equipment. Vivian laughed. Light, airy, condescending. Oh, Rose, in farming cheap and affordable are the same thing, and both will kill you. Trust me. I've been doing this 15 years. You need good equipment, modern equipment, equipment that works when you need it to work. I'll keep that in mind. Do that, and when you're ready to talk financing, come see me first. I can tell you which dealers are honest and which ones will rip you off. Vivian glanced at her watch. Diamond-studded. I've got to run. Meeting with my accountant. Tax season, you know how it is. Or you will soon enough. She climbed into the BMW and drove away. Rose stood in the parking lot of Morrison's John Deere dealership and made a decision. She wasn't going to finance anything. Saturday morning came cold and overcast. Rose arrived at the auction yard at 7 a.m., 2 hours before the sale started. Wanted to inspect the equipment before bidding, wanted to know exactly what she was getting into. The yard was muddy from recent rain, about 40 pieces of equipment scattered across 2 acres. Tractors, planters, plows, combines, all of it from the Hendricks estate. Old man Hendricks had died at 86, been farming until the day before his stroke. His kids lived in the city, didn't want anything to do with farming, selling it all. Rose found the 2 Farmalls parked next to each other near the back of the lot. The first was a 1954 International Harvester Farmalls Super MTA, diesel engine. The paint was faded to almost pink in places, rust spots on the fenders, dents in the hood. But Rose had worked on equipment long enough to see past the cosmetics. She climbed up, sat in the seat. No cab, no protection from weather. Just an open seat and a steering wheel and hope. She checked the oil. Dirty but full. Tried to turn the engine over by hand. It moved, not seized. She checked the tires. Old but holding air. Examined the hydraulic lines. Some cracking but not leaking. This tractor had been maintained. Not lovingly, but adequately. The second was a 1960 Farmall 560. Gas engine, also showing its age. Paint faded rust dents. But again, someone had taken care of it. The engine wasn't seized. The sheet metal was intact. The clutch pedal felt wrong, though, too soft. Probably needed a clutch. That would cost money. But both tractors were fundamentally sound. They'd run, they'd work. They just needed maintenance and care. You thinking about bidding on these? Rose turned. An older farmer stood there. She recognized him. Henry Wilson. Farmed about 8 miles away. She'd seen him at the co-op. Maybe. You know anything about them? I do. Hendricks bought that Super MTA new in '54, been his main tractor for 25 years. The 560 he picked up used in '67 or '68. Both good tractors, reliable. He took care of his equipment. Not perfect, but good enough. Think they're worth buying? Henry shrugged. Depends what you want them for. If you're trying to impress neighbors or compete with folks running new equipment, no. But if you want tractors that'll work and won't bankrupt you, yes. Old Hendricks farmed 240 acres his whole life with those 2 tractors and not much else. Made a living. Raised 4 kids, retired with money in the bank. That's what I'm trying to do. Then you're looking at the right equipment. Just don't expect anyone to be impressed. Rose smiled slightly. I'm not trying to impress anyone. Smart woman. At 9 a.m., the auction started. The auctioneer, a fast-talking man named Dutch Williams, who'd been running auctions in the county for 30 years, worked through the household items first. Furniture, dishes, tools. Then he moved to farm implements. A grain drill sold for $800. A plow for $650. A disc for $400. Then he got to the tractors. All right, folks, next up we've got a 1954 International Harvester Farmalls Super MTA diesel. You all see it sitting over there. It runs, needs some cosmetic work, but it's a good working tractor. Been on this farm for 25 years. Who'll start me at $3,000? Silence. People looked at the tractor. Several shook their heads. These were farmers who wanted new equipment, modern equipment, tractors with cabs and air conditioning and 100 horsepower, not a 25-year-old relic. All right, 2,500, nothing, 2,000, still nothing, 1,500 to get us started. Rose raised her hand. 1,200. Someone in the crowd snickered. Rose felt her face get hot, but kept her hand up. Dutch looked around. I got 1,200. Anyone give me 13? Silence. 1,200 going once, twice. Sold to the young lady in the flannel shirt for $1,200. A smattering of applause. Rose wasn't sure if it was congratulatory or mocking. The 560 came up next. 1960 Farmall, 560 gas engine. Same deal, folks. It runs, needs some work. Who'll start me at 2,000? Nothing. 1,500, 1,000. Rose raised her hand again. 900. This time the snicker was louder. Someone said loud enough for others to hear, "What's she going to do with that junk?" Dutch ignored it. 900. Anyone else? Nothing. Sold for 900 to the same young lady. Rose paid the total, $2,100, plus $100 buyer's premium, $2,200 total. She had $9,800 left of her $12,000. As she finished the paperwork, a voice behind her said, "That's a hell of a gamble you just made." Rose turned. Clayton Morrison stood there, arms crossed, expensive leather jacket, smirking. "Clayton, didn't know you came to auctions. Sometimes I check them out. See what the competition's selling. See what desperate farmers are buying." He looked at the two Farmalls. Rose could see the judgment in his eyes. "Those are junk rows. They're 25 and 19 years old. You just wasted $2,200. They run. They work. That's all I need." "No, that's not all you need. You need reliability. You need efficiency. You need parts availability. Those old Farmalls parts are going to be expensive if you can even find them. Downtime is going to kill you. You'll spend more time fixing them than farming with them." "We'll see." "No, Rose, we won't see. We know. I've been in this business for 26 years. I've seen hundreds of young farmers try to start out cheap with old equipment trying to save money. You know how many of them actually succeeded, maybe 1 in 10. One. The rest either upgraded to proper equipment within 3 years or quit farming altogether." "Then I guess I'll be that 1 in 10. Clayton laughed. Actually laughed out loud. Several people turned to look. "Rose, I like your optimism. I really do. It's cute. But optimism doesn't harvest crops. Modern equipment does. When those old Farmalls break down and they will trust me, they will you come see me. I'll still make you a deal on a proper tractor. Might even give you a little trade-in credit for the scrap metal." He walked away, still chuckling, shaking his head. Rose stood there in the muddy auction yard, looking at her two old Farmalls, wondering if everyone was right and she was wrong, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake. Then she borrowed a trailer from Henry Wilson and hauled both tractors home. Time to find out. Before we go any further, understand what Rose Cooper was attempting in April of 1979. She wasn't just trying to farm with old equipment. She was trying to prove an entire philosophy that went against everything the agricultural industry was telling farmers to do. She was trying to prove that you could build a farming operation without debt, that you could succeed with paid-for equipment instead of financed equipment, that you could farm 190 acres without an $8,000 annual payment hanging over your head. If you want to know how two junk Farmalls and conservative farming let a 31-year-old woman keep her farm through the worst agricultural crisis in 50 years while half her county lost everything, you need to understand what happened next. Because this wasn't just about tractors, it was about freedom. Rose spent April and the first half of May working on both tractors. Uncle Robert's old barn became her shop. It wasn't much. Dirt floor, leaky roof, no heat. But it had space and it had tools, and that was enough. The 1954 Super MTA needed work, but it wasn't major. Hydraulic seals were leaking. Rose ordered new ones from a salvage yard for $60 and spent 2 evenings replacing them. Changed the oil and all filters, another $40. Found a crack in the fuel tank that was seeping. Welded it herself after draining the tank. The air filter was so clogged it was a miracle the engine ran at all. New filter $35. Total cost for the Super MTA about $280 in parts. Time invested about 40 hours spread over 2 weeks. The 1960 560 needed more. The clutch was definitely bad. Slipping under load. Rose found a used clutch assembly at a tractor salvage yard 2 counties over for $90. Drove out there on a Saturday, brought it home, spent an entire weekend installing it, had to split the tractor, separate the engine from the transmission, pull it apart in the middle. Hardest mechanical job she'd ever done, but she got it done. While she had the tractor apart, she fixed an oil leak from the rear main seal, replaced some worn steering components, fixed a hydraulic line that was cracked. Total cost for the 5 and 60 about $230 in parts. Time about 50 hours over 2 weekends. By early June, both tractors were running strong. Rose's total equipment investment $2,100 for the tractors, $510 in repairs, plus the $100 buyer's premium, $2,710 total. Compare that to the $38,000 4240 Clayton Morrison had tried to sell her, or the $620 monthly payment, $52,000 over 7 years, $5,400 a year. Rose took stock of her situation. She had $9,700 left, needed seed. That would cost about $1,800. Needed fertilizer, another $1,000. Needed fuel, maybe $500 for the season. That left $4,800 for living expenses and emergencies. It would be tight, but possible. She planted 80 acres of corn and 80 acres of soybeans. Borrowed a 4-row planter from Henry Wilson, paid him back by helping with his wheat harvest in July. 3 days of hard work running a grain cart. Fair trade. The Super MTA became Rose's primary field tractor. It had more power, could pull bigger implements. The 560 handled lighter work, running the cultivator, hauling wagons, doing odd jobs around the farm. They were slow, no question about that. Modern tractors had twice the horsepower, could cover ground twice as fast. Rose's neighbours with 4440s could plant their fields in 3 days. Took Rose almost 2 weeks. But speed didn't matter if you couldn't make the payment. All summer people would see Rose out in the fields on those old red tractors and shake their heads. At the co-op, she'd hear the comments. That Cooper woman's going to learn the hard way. Those old Farmalls are going to break down mid-season and leave her stranded. She'll be shopping for real equipment by fall. Just watch. Even her mother-in-law worried. Lorraine Cooper, 72 years old, called one evening in July. "Rose, honey, are you sure about this? Maybe you should have financed one good tractor instead of buying 2 old ones." "Lorraine, I can't risk it. If I take on a payment and something goes wrong, bad weather, bad prices, equipment breakdown, I lose everything. This way, worst case, I have a bad year, but I keep the farm." "I just worry, dear." "I know. But I'm okay. Really." Lorraine hesitated. Then, "Vivian called me yesterday. She's worried too. She thinks you're being too stubborn, too proud to ask for help." Rose closed her eyes. Of course Vivian had called. Of course she was spreading her opinions through the family. "I'm not too proud. I'm being careful." "I know, dear, I know." But Rose could hear the doubt in Lorraine's voice. Everyone doubted. Everyone thought she was making a mistake. Everyone except Warren. Warren would come home from his construction job at 6 p.m. Would find Rose in the barn covered in grease working on a hydraulic line or adjusting a carburetor. He'd sit on an overturned bucket and hand her tools and tell her she was doing great. "They're running good," he'd say. "They're running. That's all that matters. Everyone thinks I'm crazy." Everyone thought the Wright brothers were crazy too. Look how that turned out. Rose would smile despite herself. Warren had a way of making her feel less alone in this. Harvest came in early October. Rose hired a custom harvester to combine her corn and beans. Couldn't afford her own combine yet, and Henry Wilson's was tied up with his own harvest. The corn made 85 bushels per acre. Not spectacular, but decent for first-year ground that hadn't been farmed in a decade. Soybeans made 32 bushels per acre. Again, decent. Grain prices were okay in 1979. Not great, but okay. Corn was around $2.40 per bushel. Soybeans around $6.50. Rose did the math. 80 acres, corn times 85 bushels times $2.40 equals $16,320. 80 acres, beans times 32 bushels times $6.50 equals $16,640. Total gross, $32,960. Expenses: seed $1,800, fertilizer $1,000, fuel $600 less than estimated, custom harvesting $2,200, miscellaneous $400, Total expenses $6,000. Net income from farming $26,960. But Rose also had living expenses. She'd kept those minimal. Lived in Uncle Robert's old farmhouse, cooked her own meals, didn't go out much. Figure she spent about $12,000 for the year. That left $14,960. She put $10,000 into savings, kept $5,000 as operating cash for the next year. She'd made it through year one. The farm hadn't made her rich, but she'd survived. More importantly, she'd proven the tractors could do the work. When Clayton Morrison heard about Rose's harvest numbers at the co-op small towns everyone knows everyone's business, he was genuinely surprised. "Huh," he said to another dealer, "maybe those old Farmalls had more life in them than I thought." But then he added, "Let's see if they make it through year two. First year's the easy one." Rose heard about it third hand. Didn't care. She'd proven what she needed to prove. To herself. The tractors worked. Her plan worked. She could farm without debt. That's all that mattered. But she didn't know what was coming. Didn't know that 1980 would change everything. Didn't know that the next decade would test every principle she believed in about debt and equipment and what it really meant to farm smart instead of farm big. She didn't know that within 6 years, half the farmers in her county would lose everything. Their farms, their equipment, their futures, all gone. She didn't know that the dealer who laughed at her would go out of business, that her sister-in-law would stand at an auction watching everything she owned get sold to strangers. Rose didn't know any of that on that cold December night in 1979 when she sat at the kitchen table with Warren, looking at her first-year farm income statement, feeling proud and terrified and hopeful all at once. She just knew she'd survived year one, and that her 2 old Farmalls, the ones everyone called junk, were sitting in the barn, paid for, running, ready for year two. Sometimes that's all you can ask for, to make it through one more year, to owe nothing, to sleep at night without the weight of debt pressing down on your chest. Rose Cooper understood that, even if no one else did. Not yet, anyway. The invitation came in late March 1980. Easter dinner at Lorraine Cooper's house. The whole family. Warren's sister Vivian and her husband Earl, their 2 kids. Lorraine's brother Thomas and his wife, a dozen people around one table doing what families do, eating ham, making small talk, pretending everything was fine. Rose held the invitation in her hand and felt her stomach tighten. A whole afternoon with Vivian. Wonderful. But you went to family dinners. That's what you did, even when you didn't want to, especially when you didn't want to, because not going meant admitting there was a problem, and Rose wasn't ready to admit that yet. Spring had come early that year. The fields were drying out faster than expected. Planting would start soon. Rose had spent March preparing, servicing the tractors, checking implements, planning her approach to year two. But something had changed in the air, something she could feel every time she went to town, every time she stopped at the co-op or the bank or the feed store. Optimism. No, more than optimism. Euphoria. Grain prices were climbing. Corn had hit $3.50 a bushel. Soybeans were pushing $7.60. Export markets to the Soviet Union and China were wide open. Demand was insatiable. Farmland values were rising 15–20% a year in some areas. And everywhere Rose went, she heard the same message. This is the time to grow. Expand your operation. Buy more land. Upgrade your equipment. Finance it all, because land values are rising so fast you'll build equity even with debt. The agricultural boom was in full swing, and everyone was jumping in with both feet. Everyone except Rose. She'd read the markets, seen the prices, done the math. And something about it made her nervous. When everyone's this confident, her Uncle Robert used to say, that's when you should be cautious. When everyone's saying the same thing, someone's about to be very wrong. But try telling that to farmers who were seeing corn prices double in 18 months. Rose pulled into Lorraine's driveway Easter Sunday at 1 p.m., Warren beside her. Their truck was 10 years old, reliable, paid for. It got them where they needed to go. Parked next to it was Vivian's BMW, brand new. Rose had seen it at church 2 weeks ago. Vivian had made sure everyone saw it. Metallic blue, leather interior, probably $30,000. Financed, of course. Rose and Warren walked up to the house carrying a pie Rose had baked that morning. Apple. From scratch. Because that's what you did when you couldn't afford to buy fancy desserts. Lorraine answered the door. 73 years old now, silver hair, warm smile. She hugged them both. Come in, come in. Everyone's here. The house smelled like ham and scalloped potatoes and green bean casserole, the good smells of Easter dinner. Rose followed Lorraine into the living room. Vivian stood by the fireplace holding a glass of wine. 46 years old, and she looked good. Hair perfect, makeup perfect, outfit that probably cost $500. She saw Rose and smiled. Rose. Warren. So glad you could make it. Rose set the pie on the dining room table among the other dishes. Store-bought rolls, a casserole someone had brought. Her homemade pie looked humble next to everything else. Vivian appeared beside her. Oh, you made a pie. How sweet. I didn't have time to bake this year, too busy with the farm, but I picked up some lovely pastries from that new French bakery in Champagne. Have you been there? No. Oh, you should go. It's divine. A bit pricey, but worth it. Life's too short for cheap desserts. Rose felt Warren's hand on her back, steadying her. Your pie looks great, honey, he said. They sat down to eat. Lorraine said grace. Everyone filled their plates. For a few minutes it was pleasant, just family sharing a meal. Then Earl Anderson, Vivian's husband, brought up farming. Hell of a year shaping up, he said. Prices are through the roof. We're planning to put in an extra 40 acres of corn this year. Take advantage while we can.
Smart, Thomas said. Wish I still farmed. I'd be making a fortune.
Vivian laughed.
We're not making a fortune yet, but we're positioning ourselves well. We just bought a new 4440. Had it delivered last week.
Lorraine looked impressed.
A new tractor. How wonderful.
$42,000. Vivian said it casually, like it was nothing. Financed over 7 years, of course, but it's an investment. The old 4020 we had was good, but this new one has so much more power. We can plant faster, work longer. It'll pay for itself in efficiency. Rose cut her ham into smaller pieces, kept her eyes on her plate. That's a lot of money, Lorraine said carefully. It is, but you have to spend money to make money in farming. Isn't that right, Rose? Rose looked up. Vivian was smiling at her. Everyone was looking at her now. I suppose, Rose said quietly. How's your first year going? Vivian asked. With the tractors you bought at auction, they must be, 25 years old now? 26 and 20. Right, 26 and 20. That must be challenging, keeping them running. They run fine. That's good. That's really good. I just worry about reliability. When you're in the middle of planting and something breaks, you can't afford downtime. That's why I prefer new equipment. Warranty coverage, dealer support, peace of mind. Earl nodded. Can't put a price on peace of mind. Exactly. Vivian took a sip of wine. Rose, what are you driving these days? I saw you pull up, but I didn't recognize the truck. Same truck we've had. Oh. A pause. How old is it now? 10 years? Another pause. 10 years. Wow. That's impressive. Most people would have upgraded by now, but I guess when you're watching every penny. She let that hang in the air. Warren's jaw tightened. Rose put her hand on his leg under the table. Don't. Lorraine tried to change the subject. This ham turned out lovely, didn't it? But Vivian wasn't done. I'm not criticizing Rose. Really, I'm not. I think it's admirable how frugal you are. It's just a different philosophy. Earl and I believe in leveraging opportunities, in using credit wisely to build wealth, but I understand not everyone is comfortable with that. We're comfortable with not having debt, Warren said. Vivian smiled. Of course. And there's nothing wrong with that, if you're content with where you are. But if you want to grow, to really build something, you have to be willing to take calculated risks. Or you have to be patient, Rose said quietly. Build slowly, within your means. Sure, Sure, if you have 30 years. But the opportunities are now, Rose, right now. Grain prices are at record highs, land values are soaring. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment, and you're sitting on the sidelines watching it happen. The table was quiet. Even the kids had stopped talking. Rose met Vivian's eyes. I'm not sitting on the sidelines, I'm farming, just like you. I'm just doing it differently. Cautiously. Responsibly. Vivian laughed, light and airy. Oh, Rose, always so serious. I'm not attacking you. I'm trying to help. I've been farming 15 years. I know what works and what doesn't, and what works is being willing to invest in your operation. Modern equipment, adequate financing, strategic growth. Rose wanted to say a lot of things, wanted to point out that Vivian's farm was mortgaged to the hilt, that the BMW was financed, that the new tractor was financed, that all this prosperity was built on a foundation of debt that could collapse if anything went wrong. But she didn't say any of that, because this was Easter dinner, and Vivian was Warren's sister, and you didn't start family fights at Easter dinner. So Rose smiled and said, I appreciate the advice, and ate her ham and tried to ignore the way Vivian looked at her, like she was a child who didn't understand how the real world worked, like she was naive, backward, foolish. After dinner, Rose helped Lorraine clean up in the kitchen. Through the window she could see Warren and Earl talking in the backyard. Vivian was showing the new BMW to Thomas and his wife. Lorraine washed dishes. Rose dried. Don't let her get to you, Lorraine said quietly. I'm trying not to. She means well, she's always been competitive, even as a child, always had to have the best, be the best, show everyone she was succeeding. I know. And she worries about you. She told me so. She thinks you're taking unnecessary risks with old equipment. Rose set down the plate she was drying. Lorraine, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Who has more risk me with tractors I own free and clear, or Vivian with a $42,000 payment hanging over her head? Lorraine was quiet for a long moment. The only sound was water running in the sink. I don't know, Rose. I honestly don't know. I'm not a farmer. I just worry about both of you. I understand. But Rose could tell that Lorraine was leaning toward Vivian's approach. Modern equipment, leverage, growth. That's what successful farming looked like. Not a 31-year-old woman with 26-year-old tractors and a stubborn refusal to take on debt. They drove home in silence. Warren was angry. Rose could feel it radiating off him. She had no right, he finally said. It's okay. It's not okay. The way she talked to you, the way she made you feel small. I don't feel small. Yes, you do. I can see it. Rose looked out the window at the fields rolling past, green with new growth, beautiful in the late afternoon light. Maybe she's right, Rose said quietly. What? Maybe I am missing opportunities. Maybe I should be taking risks. Warren pulled the truck over to the side of the road, turned to face her. Rose Cooper, listen to me. You are one of the smartest people I know. You think things through, you plan, you're careful, and there is nothing wrong with that. Vivian can buy all the new equipment she wants. She can finance it and leverage it and build her empire. But at the end of the day, you know what you have that she doesn't. What? Peace. You sleep at night. You don't lie awake worrying about payments. You own your tractors. You own your land. Nobody can take that from you. That's worth more than a BMW. Rose felt tears sting her eyes. Everyone thinks I'm wrong. Everyone thought Columbus was wrong too. Everyone thought Edison was crazy. Everyone laughed at the first person who said humans could fly. Being different doesn't make you wrong. Sometimes it makes you the only one who's right. He pulled back onto the road, and they drove home. But the doubt had been planted. 2 months later, Clayton Morrison's Suburban pulled into Rose's driveway. It was June. Hot. Rose was in the barn changing oil on the Super MTA, covered in grease, hair pulled back. She heard the vehicle, wiped her hands on a rag, walked outside. Clayton got out wearing expensive sunglasses and a John Deere polo shirt. Rose,
Got a minute? Sure, Clayton. What brings you out? He looked around the farm, the fields, the old barn, the two Farmalls visible through the open door. Well, I've got to hand it to you. You made it through a year with those old Farmalls. I'm impressed. Really am. Thanks. Proved they could do the work. They did the work. Clayton walked over to the Super MTA, looked it up and down, touched the fender, got rust on his hand, wiped it on his pants. But you've proven your point now. You can farm. Everyone knows that. Now it's time to upgrade to equipment that'll let you really succeed, let you really compete. Rose felt something cold settle in her chest. I'm not interested in competing. I'm interested in farming. But that's the same thing, Rose. Look, I've got a barely used 4240 that just came in on trade. Beautiful machine. Only 200 hours on it. Guy upgraded to a 4640 after 1 year. I can let you have the 4240 for 32,000. That's 6,000 off new, and I can get you financed with just 2,000 down. Rose set down the oil pan she was holding. Clayton, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not taking on a $30,000 debt. These two Farmalls are paid for. They work. That's all I need. But you're leaving money on the table. With modern equipment, you could farm faster, more efficiently. You could take on more ground. I know Henry Wilson's looking to lease out 80 acres because he can't keep up with his current equipment. You could lease that, expand to 270 acres. With a 4240, you could handle it easy. And how much would that cost me? Clayton smiled. Well, lease payment on the ground would be maybe $40 an acre. That's $3,200 a year. Your tractor payment would be about $550 a month, so $6,600 a year. Call it $10,000 total in new fixed costs. Rose did the math. So I'd add $10,000 in fixed costs I have to pay whether the crop's good or not to maybe make $15,000 more gross income, which after expenses might net me $8,000. That's less than I'm making now, and I'd have all the risk. But Rose land values are going up 15% a year. This is the time to leverage up and grow. Everyone's doing it. And there it was. Everyone's doing it. Dale Patterson just bought a new 4440, Clayton continued. Tom Bradley got a 4640 and a new combine. Bob Anderson bought another 80 acres and upgraded all his equipment. These guys are positioning themselves for the future. Or positioning themselves to lose everything when the cycle turns. Clayton laughed. That same laugh from the auction. You really think there's going to be some kind of crisis? Rose agriculture is booming. This is the best time in history to be a farmer. Grain prices are at record highs. Export markets are wide open. The government's encouraging production. Land values are rising. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. That's exactly what worries me. When everyone's saying the same thing, when everyone's confident, when prices seem too good to be true, that's usually right before everything falls apart. That's a very pessimistic way to look at the greatest agricultural boom in American history. I prefer to call it cautious. Clayton shook his head, took off his sunglasses, looked at Rose with something between pity and frustration. Rose, you're going to regret this. I'm telling you. In 5 years, you'll be farming the same 190 acres with the same old tractors while your neighbors own 500, 1,000 acres with modern equipment and operations that actually make money. And you'll realize you missed the opportunity because you were too scared to take a calculated risk. Maybe. Or maybe in 5 years I'll still be farming while they're working in town because they couldn't make their payments when things got tough. Clayton put his sunglasses back on. I guess we'll see. But when you're ready, and you will be ready, eventually come see me. The offer stands. He got in his Suburban and drove away. Rose went back to changing oil on her 26-year-old tractor and wondered if maybe everyone else was right and she was wrong. The whispers started at the co-op in July. Rose went to buy seed for a late planting. Walked in and the conversation stopped. Just for a second, but she noticed. 3 women stood by the counter. One of them was Margaret Simmons, whose husband farmed near Vivian.
When they saw Rose, Margaret smiled. "Rose, hi, how's the farm?" "Good. Busy?" "I bet. Vivian told me you're still using those old tractors you bought at auction. That must be challenging." "They work fine." "That's good. That's really good. I just can't imagine farming with equipment that old. Hank just bought a new 4040. Cost a fortune, but it's worth it. So much more reliable than old equipment." Rose paid for her seed and left. At church the next Sunday she overheard another conversation. Didn't mean to. Was just walking past the ladies' group on the lawn after service. "I heard she still drives that old truck," someone said. 10 years old. And the tractors are even older. "I don't understand it. Is she poor? Did something happen?" "No, Vivian says she's just extremely frugal, refuses to spend money on anything." "That's sad. Life's too short to drive an old truck." Rose kept walking. Pretended she hadn't heard, but it continued. At the grain elevator, at the feed store, at the bank. Everywhere she went she could feel people looking at her, talking about her. The woman who refused to modernize, the woman who was too cheap to buy decent equipment. In August, there was a church bake sale, fundraiser for the youth group. Rose made 3 dozen cookies, chocolate chip, from scratch, took them to the church basement where tables were set up. Vivian was there with professionally decorated cupcakes from a bakery in Champaign, $12 a dozen. "Rose, you made cookies." "How wonderful." Vivian's voice carried across the room. "I didn't have time to bake this year, too busy with the farm. Plus, these days I just find it easier to support local businesses. These are from that amazing French bakery I told you about." Rose set her cookies on the table. They looked homemade. Because they were. Next to Vivian's professional cupcakes, they looked humble. "Baking is relaxing for me," Rose said. "Oh, I'm sure it is, if you have the time. Earl and I are just running so hard with the expansion. We're up to 320 acres now, leased another 40. It's exhausting but exciting. Growing a business is so much work." Other women gathered around. Vivian held court. "Of course the new equipment helps. The 4440 is a beast. We can plant our entire operation in 3 days now. Remember when it used to take 2 weeks? Those were the days." She laughed. Others laughed with her. Rose stood there holding her plate of homemade cookies and felt very small. That night she told Warren about it. "I'm tired of being judged," she said. They sat on the porch of the farmhouse. Summer evening, crickets singing, stars coming out. "I know. Everyone thinks I'm doing it wrong. Everyone thinks I'm cheap, or poor, or scared. You're none of those things. Then why does it feel like I am—" Warren took her hand. "Because peer pressure doesn't stop when you graduate high school. It just gets more expensive." Rose almost smiled. Almost. "Do you ever wonder if we should do what they're doing?" she asked. "Buy new equipment, expand, take on some debt to grow?" "No. Not even a little. Not even a little. You want to know why? Why? Because I see the way you sleep. I see the way you wake up in the morning without that knot of worry in your stomach. I see you working on those tractors that are paid for, working ground that's paid for, making decisions based on what makes sense, not on what you owe. That's freedom, Rose. Real freedom. And no amount of new equipment is worth giving that up." "But we're not growing. We're not shrinking either. And when the bad years come, and they will come, we'll survive. Can Vivian say the same?" Rose leaned her head on his shoulder. "I hope she can." "So do I." But hope doesn't make payments. Thanksgiving 1980 was worse. Lorraine's house again. The whole family. But this year, Vivian arrived in full triumph. She'd just returned from Europe. 2 weeks in Paris and London. $8,000 for the trip. Financed, of course, but she didn't mention that part. She had photos. Hundreds of photos. The Eiffel Tower, Big Ben, museums, restaurants, shopping. She passed them around the table during dinner. "This was our suite at the hotel in Paris. Can you believe the view? And this was the restaurant where we had dinner our first night. Michelin starred. The meal alone was $400, but it was worth every penny." Lorraine looked impressed. "How wonderful! What an experience!" It really was. Life-changing, honestly. It makes you realize how important it is to enjoy life, to not wait, to seize opportunities while you can. She looked at Rose. Rose, have you traveled much? Not really. Oh, you should. It's so enriching. Where would you want to go if you could go anywhere? Rose thought about it. I don't know. Never really thought about it. Never thought about it. Vivian seemed genuinely surprised. You've never dreamed about seeing Paris, or Rome, or London? I guess I've been focused on other things. Like tractors. Vivian said it with a smile, but there was an edge to it. Like farming, Rose corrected. Of course, farming, with your vintage equipment. Vivian sipped her wine. You know, Earl and I were talking about that, about how you're so committed to those old Farmalls. It's admirable in a way, nostalgic. They work. For now. But Rose, what happens when they don't? What happens when you're in the middle of planting and something major breaks a transmission, an engine? Those parts aren't easy to find for tractors that old. You could be down for weeks. I'll deal with it when it happens. But that's reactive, not proactive. Modern farmers plan ahead. They invest in reliability, in warranty coverage, in dealer support. That's how you minimize risk. Earl chimed in. Vivian's right. We had a hydraulic issue last month. Called the dealer. They had a tech out within 2 hours. Fixed it same day. No charge because of the warranty. Can't do that with a 1954 tractor. Rose set down her fork. You're right. I can't call a dealer, but I also don't have a $700 monthly payment, so when I need to fix something, I have the money to do it. Silence around the table. Vivian recovered first. Well, different strokes for different folks. Some people prioritize experiences and growth. Others prioritize security. She said the word like it was a consolation prize. Warren spoke up. Nothing wrong with security. Of course not. I didn't mean to imply there was. It's just a different philosophy. Earl and I believe in living life to the fullest, in taking calculated risks, in not letting fear hold us back. We're not afraid, Rose said quietly. We're careful. Sure, careful, conservative, cautious, whatever you want to call it. Vivian smiled. I'm just glad we chose differently. Life is so much richer when you're not worried about every dollar. Rose wanted to say, you should be worried. You're leveraged to the hilt. One bad year and you're done. But she didn't. Because it was Thanksgiving and family. And you kept your mouth shut at Thanksgiving dinner, even when your sister-in-law was basically calling you a coward. They drove home that night, and Rose cried, really cried, sat in the passenger seat of their old truck and let it out. I hate this, she said. I hate feeling judged. I hate feeling like I'm doing everything wrong when I know I'm doing it right. Warren pulled over, held her. You're not doing anything wrong. Then why does everyone think I am? Because they're measuring success wrong. They think success is new equipment and fancy trips and impressing people. But that's not success. That's debt dressed up as prosperity. What if they're right, though? What if I am being too cautious? What if I'm missing opportunities? Rose, look at me. She did. You have 190 acres free and clear. You have equipment that's paid for. You have money in the bank. You sleep at night. That's success, real success. Everything else is just noise. It's loud noise. I know, but it's still noise. They drove home, and Rose tried to believe him, tried to hold on to the conviction that had brought her this far, that paying cash and avoiding debt and farming within her means was the right path. But it was hard, so hard, because everyone around her was thriving, or seemed to be. New equipment, bigger operations, trips to Europe, new vehicles, prosperity everywhere she looked. And she had 2 old tractors and a truck with 160,000 miles on it. Sometimes doing the right thing felt a lot like doing the wrong thing. Rose didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. June 1981 was coming, and with it, an announcement that would prove her right and everyone else catastrophically wrong. The news came over the radio on June 12, 1981. Rose was in the barn, greasing the Super MTA's Zerk fittings. The radio sat on a workbench, crackling with static. She was only half listening. Something about the Federal Reserve. Interest rates. Chairman Paul Volcker. Then the numbers cut through the static and stopped her cold. The prime rate had hit 21%. 21%. Rose set down the grease gun, stood there in the barn trying to process what that meant. Every farmer who'd taken out loans in the last 2 years, every equipment loan at 12–13%, every land mortgage at 10–11%. When those loans came up for renewal, the new rates would be 18–19–20%. Payments would double, maybe more. She walked to the house, found Warren reading the paper. "Did you hear?" He looked up. "About the interest rates. 21%. "I heard." They sat there for a long moment. Neither of them said what they were both thinking. Everyone who financed equipment was about to get crushed. Rose went to the co-op the next day. Needed fertilizer for a late application. The place was quiet. Too quiet for a busy farming season. 3 men stood by the counter. She recognized them. Tom Bradley, Dale Miller, Bob Anderson. All of them had bought new equipment in the last 18 months. All of them had financed it. Their faces told the story before their words did. Tom saw her first. 42 years old, 3rd-generation farmer, good man, hard worker. He looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. "Rose. Tom. You okay?" "Yeah. No. I don't know." He ran his hand through his hair. "You hear about the rates?" "I heard. My 4440 loan is up for renewal in September. I took it out at 12%. Payment was $650 a month. Banker called this morning, said if I renew now rate would be 19%. Payment would go to $920. Rose felt her stomach drop. $920 a month. Yeah. And that's just the tractor. Got the combine too, and the land payment. All of it's going up. He looked at her. Really looked at her. You don't have any equipment loans, do you? No. Smart. God, that was smart. Dale Miller stepped closer. Tom will figure it out. Grain prices are still good. We can make it work. But his voice lacked conviction. Bob Anderson shook his head. Prices won't stay this high. They never do. We're screwed. Rose wanted to say something encouraging, wanted to tell them it would be okay, but she'd learned not to make promises she couldn't keep. I hope it works out, she said quietly. Tom laughed, bitter. Hope doesn't make payments. She'd heard Warren say the same thing. Amazing how certain truths became universal when the numbers stopped adding up. Rose bought her fertilizer and left. Drove home thinking about Tom's face, about the fear she'd seen there, about how fast prosperity could turn to panic. 2 weeks later, the other shoe dropped. President Reagan continued Carter's grain embargo against the Soviet Union. The export markets that had driven grain prices to record highs disappeared overnight. Corn that had been $3.50 a bushel started falling. $3.20, $3, $2.80. By the end of summer, it hit $2.10, down 40%. Soybeans crashed from $7.60 to $5.20. Every other commodity followed. The farmers who'd borrowed money expecting $3.50 corn were suddenly facing $2.10 corn and doubled interest rates. The math was lethal. Rose did the calculations one night at the kitchen table. If Tom Bradley had budgeted his $44.40 payment at $6.50 a month, based on $3.50 corn, he'd needed to sell about 240 bushels a month to cover it. Tight but manageable. Now with $9.20 payments and $2.10 corn, he'd need to sell 440 bushels a month. From the same ground, producing the same yield. Impossible. Rose looked at her own numbers. Her income had dropped too, from $27,000 last year to about $18,000 this year. But her costs were still minimal. No equipment payments, just seed, fertilizer, fuel, living expenses. $18,000 was enough. Barely. But enough. She'd survive. The question was, would anyone else Rose saw Vivian at church in October?
Her sister-in-law looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from not sleeping, from lying awake at night doing math that doesn't add up. Vivian wore a nice outfit, hair still perfect, makeup still done. But something had changed. The edges were fraying.
After service, Rose approached her. "Vivian, how are you?" Vivian turned, smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Rose, I'm fine, busy. You know how harvest is." "I do." An awkward pause. They stood in the church parking lot while families loaded into cars around them. "How's the farm?" Rose asked. "Good. Fine. Prices are down, but we're managing." Vivian's hands twisted the strap of her purse. "How about you? Those old tractors still running?" "They are." "Good, that's good." Another pause. "Rose, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever worry about money, about making it work?" Rose chose her words carefully. "I worry about weather, about timing, about doing things right, but I don't worry about payments, because I don't have any." Vivian looked at her for a long moment. Something flickered across her face. Envy, maybe, or regret. "Must be nice," she said quietly. Then Earl called from the car, and Vivian walked away. Rose stood there watching her go and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. The dominoes started falling in 1982. First it was Dale Miller. Couldn't make the land payment. Bank foreclosed in March. Everything sold at auction in May. He and his family moved to town. He got a job at the grain elevator. Then Bob Anderson. Lost the 80 acres he'd bought in 1980. Sold his new combine at a loss. Downsized to half his original operation. The Hendricks brothers. Both gone by fall of 82. Each foreclosure was the same. A notice. 90 days. Desperate attempts to refinance. Banks saying no. Auctions. Families watching strangers buy equipment they'd bought new 2 years ago for half what they owed on it. Rose went to Dale's auction. Felt obligated. He'd been her neighbor. Had helped her once when the super MTA threw a belt and she needed to borrow a truck. 200 people showed up. Most just to watch, some to bid, a few to gloat. Dale stood off to the side with his wife Linda. Both looked 20 years older than they were. Linda was crying quietly. Dale just stared at the ground. The auctioneer went through everything, the equipment, the household goods, everything. The 4440 that Dale had bought for $42,000 in 1980 sold for $18,000. The bank recovered $18,000 of the $35,000 he still owed. Dale walked away owing $17,000 on a tractor he no longer owned, plus another $42,000 on land he'd lost. His wife, his kids, everything gone. Rose didn't bid on anything, just stood there bearing witness. Afterward, she found Dale. "I'm sorry." He nodded. Couldn't speak. Just nodded. "If you need anything..." "I know." His voice cracked. "You were right, Rose. About all of it. The debt, the equipment, everything. I should have listened. You couldn't have known." "Yes, I could have." "You knew. You tried to tell us. But we didn't want to hear it. We wanted to believe the boom would last forever. We wanted to believe we could leverage our way to prosperity." He looked at her, eyes red. "You know the worst part, the absolute worst part." "What?" "I lost my grandfather's farm. He broke this ground in 1923, farmed it for 50 years, gave it to my dad. Dad farmed it 30 years, gave it to me, and I lost it in 2 years. 2 years, because I wanted a new tractor." Rose didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. Dale continued. "Everyone told me I needed modern equipment. Clayton Morrison, Vivian, everyone. They said I couldn't compete with old equipment, had to finance new, had to grow, had to leverage up. They were wrong. They were, but I believed them, and now I'm paying for it." He took a shaky breath. "You've still got your farm, don't you?" "Yes." "Still farming with those 2 old Farmalls?" "Yes." "And you're making it?" "I'm making it." Dale laughed. No humor in it, just pain. Clayton Morrison laughed at you in 1979, called your tractors junk, said you'd fail, said you needed a $40,000 financed tractor to succeed. I remember. Who's laughing now? Rose drove home from that auction with a heavy heart. Dale's words echoed in her mind. Who's laughing now? But there was no joy in being right. Not when the cost was watching good people lose everything. 1983 was worse. Jim Patterson lost his farm. Mike Sullivan, the Hendersons, 4 more families in their immediate area. At the co-op at church at the grain elevator, the conversations changed. Nobody talked about expansion anymore. Nobody showed off new equipment. The talk was all about survival, about holding on, about making it one more year. Rose kept farming. The 1954 Super MTA kept running. The 1960 560 kept working. She added a 3rd tractor that year, bought a 1958 Farmalls 450 from an estate sale for $1,800. Small, basic, paid for. Her costs stayed minimal. Her income stayed low but steady. She survived and watched half the county collapse. By 1984, the crisis had a rhythm. Spring brought renewal notices. Summer brought desperate refinancing attempts. Fall brought foreclosures. Winter brought auctions. Rose stopped going to the auctions. Couldn't bear it anymore. Couldn't watch another family lose everything. Couldn't see another man standing there watching his life get sold to strangers. But she couldn't avoid seeing Vivian. Easter, 1985. Lorraine's house again. But this time everything was different. Vivian arrived late, driving an old Chevy, not the BMW, wore a simple dress. Nothing designer, no jewelry. Hair still done but not salon fresh. Do it yourself. The confidence was gone, the superiority, the judgment, all of it stripped away by 4 years of fighting to stay afloat. They sat down to dinner. Lorraine said grace. Everyone filled their plates. It was Warren who finally broke the uncomfortable silence. "How's the farm, Vivian?" She looked up, tried to smile, failed. "It's been challenging. I heard you sold some equipment." "We had to. Couldn't keep up with the payments. Sold the 4440 last fall, working with what we have left." Lorraine looked concerned. "Oh, honey, I didn't know things were that difficult." "They're difficult for everyone, Mom. We're not special." Vivian picked at her food. "We're trying to hang on, but it's hard, really hard." Rose felt eyes on her, felt the weight of unspoken questions. After dinner, she found Vivian in the kitchen, alone. "Vivian." Her sister-in-law turned. No smile, no pretense. "Rose, if you need help." "I don't need help." Sharp, defensive, then softer. "I'm sorry. That came out wrong. I'm not good at this. At admitting I'm struggling." "None of us are." Vivian leaned against the counter, looked older than her 51 years. "You tried to tell me," she said quietly. "Back in 1980, when I was buying the 4440. When I was telling you to finance equipment, to leverage up, to grow, you tried to warn me. I didn't know this would happen. But you knew it could. You knew debt was dangerous. You knew boom cycles don't last forever. You knew all the things I was too arrogant to see." Rose didn't know what to say. Vivian continued. "I called you cheap, backward, scared. I made fun of your old tractors, your old truck. I acted like you were doing everything wrong and I was doing everything right." "Vivian, no, let me finish. I was wrong. About all of it. Those old Farmalls you bought, they're better than the 4040 I bought. You know why. Because you own them. They're yours. No bank can take them. No interest rate can make the payment unaffordable. They're freedom. I got lucky. No, you were smart. And I was stupid. I believed the hype. I believed Clayton Morrison and the ag economists and everyone who said debt was normal. Growth was mandatory. Modern equipment was necessary. And now I'm paying for it.
Are you going to make it? Vivian was quiet for a long moment.
I don't know. We owe too much. Even with the equipment sold, we're still underwater. If the bank calls the loans, we're done. Maybe they won't. Maybe. But she didn't sound hopeful. Rose drove home that night thinking about Vivian's face, about the defeat she'd seen there, about how fast pride turns to desperation when the numbers stop working. 3 months later, the bank called Vivian's loans. The notice came in June 1985. Rose heard about it at church. The whisper network that had once spread gossip about her old tractors now spread news of Vivian's foreclosure. 90 days to vacate. Everything would be sold at auction in September. Rose tried calling. Vivian didn't answer. Tried visiting. Nobody was home. Finally caught her at the co-op in August. Vivian! Her sister-in-law turned, eyes hollow, face gaunt. This wasn't just financial stress anymore. This was someone breaking. Rose, hi. I heard. I'm so sorry. Thanks. Flat. Empty. Is there anything I can do? Unless you can make $180,000 appear no. Rose felt that number settle in her chest. $180,000. Debt accumulated over 5 years. Equipment, land, operating expenses, all of it adding up to an impossible sum. I didn't know it was that much. Neither did we, until they added it all up, told us what we owed, what the assets were worth, showed us the math. Vivian laughed. No humor, just pain. Want to know the really funny part? The 4440 I bought for $42,000 in 1980. It's worth maybe 22 now, if I can even find a buyer. So even selling everything, I'll still owe over 100,000. On equipment I no longer own. On land I no longer farm. That's the American dream, right? Vivian, I'm so sorry. Stop saying that. Not angry, just tired. You have nothing to be sorry for. You were right. I was wrong. That's all there is to it. She walked away before Rose could respond. The auction was scheduled for September 14th, a Saturday. Clear skies, perfect weather for watching someone's life get dismantled piece by piece. Rose almost didn't go, didn't want to, but she went anyway. Because Vivian was family, because bearing witness mattered, because someone needed to remember that these weren't just tractors and land, they were dreams. The auction yard was packed. 300 people, maybe more. Vivian stood at the edge of the crowd with Earl. Their 2 kids, grown now, stood with them. Everyone aged by crisis, everyone marked by loss. Rose saw them and almost turned around. But Vivian spotted her, made eye contact, gave a small nod. Permission to stay. The auctioneer was Dutch Williams, same man who'd sold Rose her Farmalls 6 years ago. He climbed onto his platform and started his patter. Folks, we've got a full day ahead. Good equipment, good land. Let's get started. First item, 1975, John Deere 4220. They worked through the smaller items first. Tools, implements, grain wagons. Each item a piece of a life. Each item sold for less than it cost. Then came the 4440. Next up, folks, 1980 John Deere 4040. You all know this tractor. Good machine. Well maintained. Some wear but solid. Bought new for 42,000. Let's start the bidding at 25. Silence. 20,000. A hand in the back. Some dealer looking for inventory. 20,000. Do I hear 22? Another hand. 22. 25. The first hand again. 25. 28. Silence. 25. Going once. Twice. Sold for $25,000. The gavel fell. Vivian owed $35,000 on that tractor. The bank recovered 25. She walked away, owing $10,000 on equipment she'd never see again. Rose felt sick. They continued. The combine, the planter, the smaller tractors, all of it selling for half of what it cost, half of what was owed. Then the household goods. That's when Vivian broke. They were selling furniture, dishes, personal items. And then they brought out boxes of the kids' old toys, things that should have been kept, should have been saved for grandchildren. But when you owe $180,000, nothing is sacred, Vivian sobbed. Earl held her. Their kids stood there with tears running down their faces. Rose couldn't watch anymore. She walked to the edge of the crowd, found herself looking at a 1958 Farmall 450, small tractor, Vivian's backup machine, well maintained, good condition. She thought about her own 3 Farmalls, thought about how they'd saved her life, thought about how Vivian had mocked them while buying equipment that destroyed her. The 450 came up for auction. 1958 Farmall 450, gas engine, runs good, starts good, basic tractor but solid. Who'll give me 1,500? No response. 1,200, 1,000. Rose raised her hand. 1,800. People turned to look. Someone whispered her name. 1,800. Do I hear 2,000? Silence. 1,800 going once, twice. Sold to Rose Cooper for $1,800. Rose paid. Arranged for delivery. Then she found Vivian. Her sister-in-law stood alone now. Earl had gone to fill out paperwork. The kids were sitting in the car. Rose. Vivian, I'm sorry. I bought the 450. I'll take care of it. I promise. Vivian looked at her. Really looked at her. No anger. No resentment. Just exhaustion. I know you will. You take care of your equipment. Always did. They stood there in the September sun. 2 women who'd started in such different places, who'd made such different choices, who'd ended up in such different positions. Rose, I need to say something. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Please. Rose nodded. Vivian took a breath. Do you remember when Clayton Morrison laughed at you in 1979 when you bought those 2 old Farmalls at auction? I remember. He called them junk, said you'd fail, said you needed modern equipment to succeed, said financing was smart, said debt was necessary, said everyone was doing it. I remember all of that. Well, he was wrong about everything. Those tractors weren't junk, they were freedom. And I spent 6 years not understanding that, 6 years mocking you, judging you, making you feel small because you wouldn't do what everyone else was doing. Vivian, I was wrong, Rose, completely wrong. You were right, about the debt, about the equipment, about all of it. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. Rose felt tears sting her eyes. I forgive you. You shouldn't. I don't deserve it. Maybe not, but I'm giving it anyway. Vivian pulled her into a hug, held on tight. Both of them crying now. When they separated, Vivian wiped her eyes. You know what the worst part is? I didn't do anything wrong except listen to the wrong people. Clayton told me I needed that 4440. The bank told me the loan was smart. Everyone told me I needed to modernize and grow, and I believed them. I believed prosperity required debt, success required risk, growth required leverage, and now I've lost everything because I listened to people who were selling me something. Where will you go? Earl got a job in town. We'll rent an apartment, start over, figure it out. She smiled, sad. From 320 acres to a 2-bedroom apartment, that's quite a fall. You'll survive? Will I? I don't know. But I guess I'll find out. Earl called from the car. Vivian squeezed Rose's hand once more and walked away. Rose stood there in the auction yard surrounded by strangers buying pieces of her sister-in-law's life and felt the weight of it all. She'd been right. About everything. But being right didn't feel like she thought it would. It just felt sad. 2 months later, Clayton Morrison closed his dealership. Rose heard about it at the co-op. drove past to see for herself. A banner hung across the building. Going out of business. Liquidation sale. Clayton stood outside, 59 years old now, looked 70. The crisis had aged him too. Rose pulled over, got out. Clayton? He turned, saw her. Something flickered across his face. Shame, maybe. Rose Cooper. Come to watch me fold? No, just passing by. He looked at the building. His building. 26 years of business ending. Can't sell new equipment when nobody can afford payments, he said. Can't make money on used equipment that's lost half its value. Banks won't finance. Dealers can't survive. Whole systems collapsing. I'm sorry. Are you? He looked at her. I laughed at you in 1979. Told you those Farmalls were junk. Told you you'd fail. Told you you needed a $40,000 financed tractor to succeed.
You remember all that? I remember. Well, I was wrong, completely wrong. Those tractors saved your life, and the tractors I sold destroyed everyone else's. He shook his head. 26 years. Hundreds of farmers. Most of them lost everything because they listened to me. Because I told them debt was normal. Financing was smart. Modern equipment was necessary. You were just doing your job. My job was selling debt to people who couldn't afford it. My job was profiting from farmers who trusted me. My job was being part of a system that destroyed the people I served. Rose didn't know what to say. Clayton continued. You know what kills me. You tried to do it right. You bought paid-for equipment, avoided debt, lived within your means, and I mocked you for it, called your approach foolish, told you you'd never succeed. You couldn't have known. Yes, I could have. I chose not to, because my business model required farmers to take on debt, required them to buy more than they could afford, required them to believe prosperity came from leverage. He laughed, bitter. Turns out prosperity comes from not owing anyone anything. Who knew? Oh, right, you did. He went back inside. Rose stood there for a moment, then drove home. A week later, Morrison's John Deere held its liquidation sale. Everything sold. The building, the inventory, the parts department, all of it bought by a guy who turned it into a storage facility. Clayton Morrison retired, moved to Florida, never sold another tractor. The man who'd laughed at Rose's $2,200 investment was gone, destroyed by the same system he'd promoted. Rose was 42 years old in 1990. She'd been farming for 11 years, still had her 190 acres, still had her 3 Farmalls. The 1954 Super MTA was 36 years old now, still her primary tractor. The 1960 560 was 30 years old. The 1958 450 from Vivian's auction was 32. Combined age, 98 years. Combined original cost, under $5,000. Combined debt, 0. They kept running, kept working, kept proving that paid for beats payment required. And Rose had saved money, carefully, consistently, living below her means, putting away every dollar she could. 11 years of farming, 11 years of caution. She had $42,000 in the bank. The opportunity came in August. The Morrison farm, adjacent to her east property line, came up for sale. 80 acres, good ground, well drained, would fit perfectly with her operation. The bank had held it since the '85 foreclosure, had been renting it out. Now they wanted to sell. Asking price $68,000. $850 per acre. Rose had $42,000. Could put that down. Finance the remaining $26,000 at post-crisis interest rates. Around 8%. Payment would be maybe $300 a month. She could handle that. But Rose thought about the 1980s, about Tom and Dale and Vivian, about what debt had done to them. She waited. 60 days later, the real estate agent called back. Rose, I've got a situation. The buyers who were interested backed out. The bank really wants this property sold. They'd take $60,000 cash if someone could close quick. $60,000 cash. Rose had 42. She was 18 short. She called her father-in-law, Michael Cooper, 77 years old now, had money saved from 40 years of carpentry. Michael, I need to borrow $20,000.
I'll pay you back at 6% over 5 years. You have my word. Michael didn't hesitate. Yes. Rose sold some savings bonds Uncle Robert had left her. 18,000. 42 saved plus 20 borrowed plus 18 from bonds equals 80,000. She offered the bank 60,000 cash, close in 30 days. They accepted. Rose bought 80 acres free and clear, added it to her 190. Now she had 270 acres, all paid off, all hers. No mortgage, no debt, except the personal loan to Michael, which she paid back in 4 years instead of 5. She farmed all of it with her 3 old Farmalls. People shook their heads. How could she farm 270 acres with tractors that old? But she did. Slowly, carefully, without debt, and it worked. 5 years later, in 1995, another opportunity came. 120 acres north of her property. Elderly widow wanting to retire, asking 110,000. This time Rose did take a loan, but she structured it carefully. 35,000 down, 75 financed, 15 years at 8%. Payment, 717 a month. But critically, no prepayment penalty. She farmed harder than ever, kept expenses minimal, put every extra dollar toward that loan, paid it off in 8 years, 12 years early. By 2003, Rose Cooper, 55 years old, owned 390 acres. Free and clear. Worth about $400,000 at 2003 land values. All of it farmed over 24 years with equipment she'd bought used and paid for in cash. Total equipment investment over nearly a quarter century, about $18,000. Compare that to farmers who'd financed one new tractor in 1980 for $42,000 and were still making payments on replacement equipment 23 years later. The 1954 Super MTA was 49 years old and still her primary tractor. The 1960 560 was 43 years old and still working daily. Sometimes junk turns out to be treasure. Sometimes the people who laugh at you are the ones who end up losing everything. And sometimes the best investment you can make is the one that doesn't require a payment. Rose understood that now, had understood it from the beginning really, but now everyone else did too. The woman they'd called cheap, backward, scared, foolish. She'd survived. She'd prospered. She'd built something real. Not with debt, not with new equipment, not with leverage or risk or growth strategies, with caution, with patience, with paid-for tractors and a stubborn refusal to owe anyone anything. It turned out that was enough, more than enough. It was freedom. 6 years later, Easter Sunday 2009, the phone rang. Rose, 61 years old, now silver-haired and lean from 3 decades of farm work, stood in her kitchen staring at the caller ID. Vivian Anderson, a number she hadn't seen in 4 years. She answered. "Rose?" Vivian's voice older now, tired. "I need to say something. Something I should have said 24 years ago." "Okay. Can we meet, please? I need to tell you this in person." They met at a diner in town 2 days later. Vivian, 75, now walked in looking every year of it. Grey hair pulled back, simple clothes from Walmart. Hands that showed decades of work. The arrogance was long gone, replaced by something harder to carry. Wisdom earned through loss. They ordered coffee, sat in a booth by the window. Vivian spoke first. "I've carried this for 24 years. The guilt, the shame, the knowledge that I mocked you for doing the right thing while I destroyed my own life doing the wrong thing." Rose sipped her coffee, said nothing. Let Vivian speak. "Those tractors you bought in 1979, the ones I laughed at, the ones I called junk in front of everyone at that auction, the ones I told you would fail." Vivian's hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. "I was wrong. About everything." "Vivian, no, please, let me finish. I need to say this." She took a breath. Those Farmalls weren't junk. They were freedom. And I spent 6 years not understanding that freedom is worth more than flash, more than new equipment, more than impressing people at church.
Where are you now? Rose asked quietly.
I work retail. Maya, 3 days a week. I'm 75 years old. I should be retired, sitting on a porch somewhere, playing with grandchildren. But I can't afford to retire. I'll probably work until I die. She looked out the window. Earl passed 2 years ago. Heart attack. The doctors said it was the stress. All those years of struggling, of trying to hold on, of watching everything we built disappear. It killed him. I'm sorry. I live in a rented apartment, 1 bedroom. I have nothing, Rose. Nothing except this apology I should have made decades ago. Rose reached across the table, took Vivian's hand. And you? Vivian asked. Tell me. I need to know. Did you make it? I retired last year, 60 years old. I'm leasing the land to a young woman farmer, 390 acres. Fair terms. I help her when she asks. Don't charge for the advice. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. 390 acres.
All paid for. All paid for. You did it. Everything you said you'd do, you built it, without debt, without listening to people like me, like Clayton, like everyone who told you that you were doing it wrong. I got lucky. No. Vivian shook her head firmly. Don't say that. You weren't lucky. You were wise. You saw what we couldn't see. That debt is a trap. That new equipment is a trap. That trying to impress people is a trap. You saw all of it and you said no. And I'm the one who got lucky. How? Because you're still talking to me after everything I said, everything I did, the way I treated you for years. Vivian wiped her eyes with a napkin. Do you remember Thanksgiving 1980, when I showed everyone the photos from Paris, when I made sure everyone knew how much that trip cost? I remember. I was so proud, so arrogant. I had the new tractor, the nice car, the expensive trip, and you had your old truck and your old tractors, and I felt superior.
I felt like I'd won some contest you didn't even know you were in. Vivian laughed. No humor in it, just pain and recognition. But I hadn't won anything. I'd just borrowed more, owed more, risked more. And when the crisis came, all that prosperity disappeared like smoke. The BMW got repossessed, the equipment got sold, the farm got taken, everything. It wasn't your fault, Rose said. The system? No, it was my fault. I chose to listen to Clayton Morrison instead of my own common sense. I chose to believe that debt was normal, that everyone does it, that you need it to succeed. I chose flash over freedom, and I paid for it with everything I had. They sat there for a long moment. 2 women who'd started in the same family, same county, same moment in history, who'd made such different choices and ended up in such different places. Rose, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever think about those early years when everyone was mocking you, when I was mocking you? Sometimes. Does it feel good, being right, watching everyone who laughed at you lose everything while you succeeded? Rose thought about it, really thought about it. No, she said finally. It doesn't feel good. It feels sad. Because I never wanted anyone to lose their farms. Never wanted to watch Tom and Dale and you lose everything. I just wanted to keep my own farm. That's all. Vivian nodded slowly. That's the difference between us. You wanted to succeed. I wanted to win. You wanted security. I wanted superiority. You were building something real. I was building something to show people. You were a product of your time. Everyone believed those things. You didn't. I was scared, that's all. Too scared to take on debt. Too scared to believe the boom would last forever. Fear is wisdom when everyone else is being foolish, Vivian said quietly. I just wish I'd been as scared as you were. They finished their coffee, talked for another hour, about families, about losses, about lessons learned too late. When they stood to leave, Vivian hugged her, held on tight. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for calling. Vivian walked to her old Corolla, 16 years old, rusted, but paid for. Rose walked to her truck. 12 years old now, Also paid for. Also enough. Some debts can't be paid with money, can only be paid with time and truth and the courage to admit you were wrong. Vivian had paid hers. 15 years later. Spring 2024. Rosemary Cooper, 76 years old, sat on the porch of her farmhouse watching the fields turn green with new growth. Not her fields anymore. She'd leased them to a young farmer named Katie Morrison. 28 years old, determined, smart, careful with money. No relation to Clayton, despite the name. A car pulled into the driveway. Her granddaughter Scarlett, 22, climbed out. Blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, jeans and a college sweatshirt. Her face was troubled. "Grandma?" Rose stood, hugged her. "Good drive." "Long, but I needed to talk to you." They sat on the porch with lemonade. Scarlett fidgeted with her phone. "What's wrong?" "I got approved for a car loan, $35,000, for a new Honda. My old car runs fine, but it's 8 years old and everyone says I should upgrade while my credit's good and interest rates are okay." Rose smiled. "And you came to ask me what I think?" "Yeah, because I know what you'll say, but I need to hear it anyway." "What will I say?" "That I should drive the paid-for car until it dies. That new car smell isn't worth 5 years of payments. That ownership beats debt. All the things you've been teaching me since I was little." "Smart girl. So why are you here asking—" Scarlett set down her phone, looked at her grandmother. "Because everyone has car payments, everyone finances. It's normal now. My roommates, my friends, people at work, everyone. They all think I'm weird for driving an 8-year-old car. They say I'm missing out on safety features and technology and reliability, and maybe they're right." Rose stood. "Come with me." She led Scarlett to the barn, the old barn where she'd worked on tractors for 40 years. Inside, covered in a tarp, sat the 1954 Farmalls Super MTA. 70 years old now. Rose pulled off the cover. "This tractor saved my life." "I know the story, Grandma." "No, you know the facts. Let me tell you what it means." Rose ran her hand over the faded red paint, over the rust spots and the dents and the patches. "In 1979, everyone told me I needed a $40,000 tractor, needed to finance it, needed debt to succeed. This tractor cost me $1,200. She climbed onto it, sat in the seat she'd sat in 10,000 times over 40 years. 45 years later, I still own it. It still runs. I could start it right now if I wanted to. The people who bought new tractors, most of them lost everything. Their farms, their equipment, their dreams, all gone." Scarlett was quiet. Rose continued. "That Honda you want, 35,000 financed over 5 years. What's the interest rate? 6%. So you'll pay about 40,000 total, 5,000 in interest, for a car that'll be worth maybe 15,000 when you're done paying. Do you understand what that means? I lose money. You lose 5 years. Every month for 5 years you'll owe someone money. You'll have to make that payment whether you have a job or not. Whether you're sick or healthy, whether the economy is good or bad, you'll be chained to that payment for 5 years." Rose climbed down from the tractor, stood beside her granddaughter. "Does your current car run?" "Yes." "Is it paid for?" "Yes." "Then you have reliable transportation. What you want is new transportation. And there's a difference. One is freedom, the other is 60 monthly chains." Scarlett looked at the tractor, at her grandmother, at 76 years of wisdom standing in front of her. "The dealer laughed at you when you bought this, didn't he?" "Clayton Morrison?" "Yes. Called it junk. Said I'd fail. Told me I needed modern equipment or I'd never make it." "What happened to him?" "He went out of business. Most of his customers lost their farms. But I survived. With junk." Scarlett climbed onto the tractor, sat in the seat, touched the steering wheel. "Tell me about Aunt Vivian again." Rose leaned against the tractor. "Your great-aunt Vivian was Warren's sister. She farmed bigger than me, had new equipment, a BMW, went to Paris, had everything I didn't have. And she made sure everyone knew it. What happened to her? The 1980s farm crisis happened. Interest rates hit 21%.
Grain prices crashed. She had hundreds of thousands in debt, lost everything, worked retail until she died at 82, never retired. And you? I retired at 60, own 390 acres free and clear, sleep well every night, have money saved, have peace. Scarlett sat there for a long moment. Then, what if I really want the new car? Then buy it, but save up, pay cash. Don't give banks 5 years of your life for the privilege of driving something shiny. How long would that take? If you save what the payment would be $650 a month, you'd have $35,000 in about 4.5 years. Buy a 3-year-old Honda instead of a new one, still new to you, still reliable, but you'd own it. No debt, no stress, no payments. But everyone else has car loans. Rose smiled. Everyone else also has stress, credit card debt, financial anxiety. They lie awake at night worrying about money. Is that what you want? No.
Then don't do what everyone else does. Do what works. They sat there in the barn together, 76 and 22, separated by more than half a century, united by a lesson learned in rust and sweat and patience. Did you ever regret it? Scarlett asked. The old equipment, the careful choices, missing the boom everyone else enjoyed. Never, not once. You want to know what I regret? What? Not teaching this lesson sooner, not making sure your generation understood that the greatest freedom isn't having everything you want. It's wanting nothing you can't afford. Scarlett hugged her. I'm keeping my old car. Good. And I'm saving for the next one. Cash. Even better. Because you taught me that freedom costs less than flash. Rose felt tears sting her eyes. Your generation will need that lesson more than mine did. Student loans, credit cards, car payments, mortgages, buy now, pay later. Everywhere you turn, someone's selling you debt and calling it opportunity.
What's the truth? The truth is simple. The dealer laughed when I bought 2 old tractors in 1979, called them junk, said I'd fail. 15 years later, the dealer was out of business, and half the county had lost their farms. But I still had mine, still had those junk tractors, still was proving every single day that the best equipment is the equipment you own. And sometimes, Scarlett said softly, the people laughing at you are the ones who end up losing everything. Yes. And sometimes the junk you bought is the only thing that saves you. Yes. They sat there as the afternoon light slanted through the barn windows, dust motes drifting, the old tractor solid and real between them. 70 years old and still teaching lessons about freedom and patience and the courage to say no. A week later, a young journalist named Emma Davis came to interview Rose for a feature story about farm crisis survivors. They sat on the porch. Emma, earnest and 26, had her notebook ready, digital recorder running. Mrs. Cooper, you're one of the few farmers from your generation who not only survived the 1980s crisis, but actually thrived. What's your secret? Rose thought for a long moment, looked out at the fields. Ownership beats payments, every single time. That's not a secret. It's just a truth most people don't want to hear. Can you explain what you mean? Modern equipment is impressive, makes farming easier, more comfortable, more efficient. But if you can't afford it without debt, it puts your operation at risk. You don't need it. But how can farmers compete without modern equipment? Compete with who I farmed for 39 years, built a 390-acre operation from 190, never owned a new tractor, never had an equipment payment after 1979, never lost sleep wondering if I could make a payment. You know why? Why? Because I didn't have any payments to make. Emma scribbled notes. I read that a dealer laughed at you when you bought your first tractors. Is that true? Clayton Morrison? Yes. I bought 2 old Farmalls at auction in 1979. Paid $2,100 total. Clayton told me they were junk, told me I'd fail, told me I needed a $38,000 finance tractor to succeed. And 15 years later, Clayton's dealership was out of business. Most of his customers had lost their farms.
The ones who'd listened to him and taken on debt for new equipment, they lost everything. And you. I still had my farm, still had those junk tractors, still was proving that paid for beats payment required. That must have felt vindicating. Rose shook her head. It felt sad. I didn't want anyone to lose their farms. Didn't want to watch good people destroyed by debt. I just wanted to keep my own farm. That's all I ever wanted. What would you tell young farmers starting out today? The same thing I'd tell anyone starting any business. Don't confuse prosperity with debt. Don't let people sell you things you can't afford. Don't believe that everyone's doing it, so you should too. Sometimes everyone's doing the wrong thing. What would you change if you could do it all over again? Rose smiled. Nothing, not one thing. I'd buy those same 2 tractors at that same auction, make those same conservative choices, live below my means again, ignore everyone telling me I was doing it wrong. Because it worked. Because it worked. I kept my farm when smarter farmers lost theirs, richer farmers, bigger farmers, farmers with better equipment and more land and more experience. They all lost everything because they had one thing I didn't have. What? Debt. Emma looked up from her notes. Where are they now, the people who criticized you? Clayton Morrison retired to Florida, died a few years ago. My sister-in-law, Vivian, who mocked my tractors the most, she worked retail until she died at 82. Never could afford to retire. Tom Bradley, Dale Miller. Most of the farmers who bought new equipment in 1980, they lost their farms, moved to town, got jobs, watched their dreams get sold at auction. And the tractors, Rose pointed to the barn. The 1954 Super MTA is 70 years old, still runs. I could start it right now. It's sitting in that barn, proving that sometimes the junk you buy is the only thing that saves you. Emma turned off her recorder. Can I see it? They walked to the barn. Rose pulled the tarp off the Super MTA. 70 years old. Faded paint, rust spots, dense, but solid, real, enduring. Emma took photos, ran her hand over the metal. It's beautiful. It's freedom, Rose said. That's what it is. 45 years of freedom from debt.
From worry? From having to impress anyone? That's worth more than a shiny new tractor ever could be. As Emma left, Rose stood in the barn alone with the tractor. Afternoon light slanting through the dusty windows. She climbed onto it one more time, sat in the seat, touched the steering wheel, remembered 31-year-old Rose standing at that auction in 1979. Scared, determined, raising her hand to bid $1,200 while people laughed. Remembered Vivian's mockery, Clayton's condescension, the years of judgment and doubt. Remembered Tom Bradley's foreclosure, Dale Miller's tears, Vivian's broken apology. Remembered it all, and knew without question that she'd made the right choice. The dealer had laughed, called her tractors junk, said she'd fail. But 45 years later, the dealer was dead. His customers were gone, the farms were lost, and the junk tractors. They were still here, still running, still proving that paid for beats pretty.
That ownership beats debt. That freedom is built not with leverage and growth and modern equipment, but with patience and caution and the courage to say no when everyone else is saying yes. That evening, as the sun set over the fields, Rose sat on her porch one last time. Scarlett had come back, brought dinner. They ate together, watching the light fade. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think my generation can do what you did? Live without debt? Build something real?" Rose was quiet for a long moment. "It'll be harder for you. Student loans, housing costs. Everything's more expensive. The pressure to consume is worse. Social media makes everyone's flash visible all the time. You'll be bombarded with messages that you need this car, that house these clothes, that you deserve it all, that you should buy now, pay later. So no, I didn't say that. I said it'll be harder, but possible. if you remember what matters. A paid-for car beats a fancy car with payments. A small house you own beats a mansion you owe. A life of freedom beats a life of flash. What if people judge me? They will. They'll call you cheap, weird, out of touch. They'll say you're missing out, not living your best life. All of it. You know what you do? What? You remember Clayton Morrison laughing at my tractors? You remember Vivian mocking my truck? You remember everyone who said I was doing it wrong? And then you remember who still has their farm 45 years later? Scarlett smiled. You do. I do. Because I didn't listen to them. I listened to mathematics, to common sense, to my own fear of debt, and it saved my life. They sat there as darkness fell. 2 women, 2 generations, one lesson passing from one to the other like a relay baton. The 1954 Farmalls Super MTA sat silent in the barn, 70 years old, still running, still teaching.
Sometimes the best investment is the one that doesn't require a payment. Sometimes the people who laugh at you end up losing everything. Sometimes junk turns out to be treasure. And sometimes the greatest freedom is simply owning what you have and owing nothing to anyone. Rose Cooper understood that in 1979 when she raised her hand at that auction. She understood it in 2024 sitting on her porch. And now Scarlett understood it too. The lesson would continue. The freedom would endure. The tractors would rust and fade and eventually stop running. But the truth would remain. Ownership beats payments. Always has. Always will.